Professor Biswajit Dhar. And it is not only because I have read the article which he had written in the Amrit Bazar Patrika, uh, but also I think now he's a very senior professor and he should have the first go at it. Biswajit.
Thank you, sir. I'm really honored that you've given me the first, the opportunity to go first. It's always a pleasure to be here and share. No, let me start from where Professor Dubey made a very important point about the budget, and people's perception of the budget, that it's an annual exercise and it should be treated as such. Now, I think one of the most important thing that people sort of often ignore is that in the absence of the planning process now, the budget is the only document we have where the government gives a holistic view as to which way it is going. So the direction of the economy, and the direction in which it wants to drive the economy is available only from the budget. You don't have any other document or any other forum from which you can actually understand what the government wants to do with this with the economy. And therefore, there are very important lessons here as to where the government really wants to take this economy, and what is in for the future. So I think that's the thing that needs to be recognized first and the foremost. The second thing that I would like to highlight is that if both in the economic survey and in the budget, the finance minister and the chief economic advisor, they have highlighted the problem of COVID and the COVID-induced crisis that the Indian economy has suffered from. But there is no recognition that the Indian economy, until the COVID actually struck in March, until then, for 9 consecutive quarters, the Indian economy was on a slowdown. In fact, one should go even further back, because from 2016-17, in one of the quarters, the growth rate was 8.1%. From then, it has been a downturn, sort of a downward hill. In between, there was a blip where it went up to 7% plus, and then it has been, sort of 9 continuous quarters where there's been this down. So the point that we have all been making for the past, 9 months, 10 months, is that, there are structural infirmities that the Indian economy suffers from. And the most important of these is, what Professor Dubey was also mentioning, is a severe demand constraint that we are experiencing. So, Praveen, I'm sure will elaborate on this further. The state of the labor market gives sort of telltale signs as to what is really happening to the state of demand, and the point that I would like to make at the outset is that without seriously looking at stimulating demand, Indian economy is not going to go anywhere. This is clear to everyone. I think the government has been trying to stimulate the economy through completely wrong means. For instance, in 2019, it went and offered huge tax concessions to the corporates. The corporation tax was brought down. Ostensibly, the message was that we are trying to come down to the international levels. In Indian, the effective tax rate is far too high. and we are coming down to the globally acceptable levels. But the point that is often glossed over, and this is where I think I'd like to highlight the point that Professor Dubey also has been making, that the way the numbers have been presented, and
It's a request to all the audience, please keep your microphone off. It's a great disturbance to the speakers. I have been writing it continuously.
Why don't you, as an administrator, mute all the microphones? You can mute all the microphones, and only the speaker will switch on the microphone.
yeah, I think you should do that. And yeah,
Mute all of them, and you can really the speaker will switch on.
Professor Dhar, can you unmute yourself now? Just please check if you can unmute.
Yeah, all right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. This is all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. So the way these numbers have been presented, and the fact of the matter is that there have been huge concessions that have been given to the corporates, left, right, and center. And each year we have been looking at these numbers of revenue foregone, which the government has been presenting pretty diligently. I think it was first introduced in 2005 by UPA. Dr. Manmohan Singh's government had introduced it, and every year we have been looking with a great deal of unease, the kind of concessions that have been given. So if you look at the concessions that have been given the corporates and then try to understand what the tax rates are, you will get to understand the reality that the corporates have been severely undertaxed, and opportunities for taxing the constituency that needs to be taxed is repeatedly being sort of given a go by. Now, another important aspect, and I'll just focus a bit on the resource mobilization part, because staying on this issue of corporate taxation, again in this document on revenue foregone, there is a table that the government gives, very interesting table. Many people actually miss that table. It's the first table in this annexure, which gives the corporate, the details of the corporates which have been filing e-returns, and there are about more than 8 lakh companies. And out of these 8 lakh companies, we find that around 45% of these companies have declared either losses, or they declared that they're not making any profit. So these companies are actually going scot-free. So there is no tax on them. And if you look at if you consider the companies which are declaring profits of 500 crores or more, out of 8 lakh companies, this number is only 424. Now, this is absolutely unbelievable that, in a country like India, we have these big corporate entities here, that 500 crores or more is being made by only 424 companies. So I think, there is this kind of, I'm almost compelled to say that there is this deliberate tendency to ignore those who should be taxed, and therefore the revenue side looks really thin. So in that context, all these discussion about the fact that this budget has stimulated the economy a great deal by just looking at the deficit, which the budget deficit, that the fiscal deficit that has been announced. This, I think, is barking up is a wrong tree completely. It doesn't give a real picture at all. Now, I was talking about this document on revenue foregone, but interestingly, in this budget, this document has actually gone missing. What has been included is last year's document with a bit of updating of the numbers. So we actually don't know. We are up to speed as to what has happened. Last 2 years on the tax concession. So the corporate tax break that was given, 1.5 years back, the real impact of it in terms of what we are talking about, the ability of the government to tax these corporates, that is not available to us. So I think there is a serious lacuna there in the budget. Now the revenue accruals really tell us another story, and this is that the projections for 2021-22 show that these projections are actually lower than the budget estimates of 2021. So there's another thing very clear, that according to the government, despite what the CA had mentioned about this V-shaped recovery and Indian economy coming back to normal in 2021-22. Now the government's own estimates about the tax collections tell us that this is not going to be normal. We'll still be below the pandemic level, and therefore it was imperative for the government to have done much more in terms of stimulating the economy. And why was this more important? Because what we have seen from the government is that as compared to other G20 countries, its peers, the fiscal stimulus provided by India was one of the lowest. So IMF tells us that the fiscal stimulus was only 3.1% of the GDP. The 20% of GDP economic package which was talked about was and we also did our calculations, had a lot of other things, but it was not the fiscal stimulus which could have actually stimulated demand if it was, of course, if it was used in a particular in the right kind of a manner, and that has to be emphasized, because fiscal policy on its own is not the solution. We have to put the money where the mouths are, where the needs are, and what we find is that this budget and scheme after scheme, wherever there was a need to put in the funds in order to stimulate demand, that opportunity has been sort of missed. So let me give one or two examples, and I'm sure other colleagues will elaborate on them further. The NREGA spending, for instance. The good news. There's a good news and a bad news. The good news is that in the pandemic times, spending actually had gone up. This is what the revised estimates tell us. But the proposed figures show a sharp decline from the increase that was made in the past several months. So which again tells a story that the government thinks that this is only a pandemic-induced crisis. There is no structural problem. And therefore, they think that, the moment, we declare that we are free from COVID, everything is going to come back to normal. And again, as I said, ignoring the fact that there were structural deficiencies that the economy was suffering from. And here again, there's been a lot of discussion or a lot of talk about investing in infrastructure. Now, all these announcements that have been made are in the big infrastructure projects. But in the rural areas, in the infrastructure that would have really helped agriculture to overcome the crisis that it is facing, and especially in times like this when there is this, the agitation that we are seeing. Proper focus on NREGA could have actually brought the focus back on investment that agriculture needs. So I think it's a double whammy. Bringing down the spending on Narega is a double whammy. Is going to hit the economy twice. I also wanted to, there are lots of things to say, but I know in the interest of time, I'll just focus on two things that again Professor Dubey had very rightly focused on. One is this whole thing of foreign borrowing. And if you look at the foreign borrowing, external assistance, the number that has been given, this is a historically high level, has reached a historically high level of 91,000 crores. This is what is being proposed in the revised estimates. And of course, this shows 21-22 figure shows a decline. But I think with the government not really intending to tax those who should be taxed and relying on borrowing, including external borrowing, this is something that is a serious problem. Again, on privatization, Professor Dubey quite rightly said that IMF has actually been emphasizing a lot on the importance of state-owned enterprises, and in their recent fiscal monitors, they have been actually giving this evidence that since the economic downturn of 2008, there has been a spurt in reliance on state-owned enterprises in the West, and they have become major drivers in many of the Western economies. Contrary to that kind of experience that we are seeing from the Western countries, India is downsizing its state-owned enterprises, and most of them are on the block now. And I think what the government intends to do is really to ensure that that all these enterprises are phased out. They're put into private hands, and that, I think that is the ultimate objective with which the government is moving forward. Now, it's also interesting that the FDI numbers that the government is talking about, and this discussion that India has been attracting a whole huge volume of FDI, doesn't really tell another story, which is that much of this FDI has come in through selling existing enterprises. So if you look at the operations of Reliance and the extent to which they have sold their shares to foreign companies, you can really understand the situation. So the whole scenario that is turning out in this country is that you have the government which is now selling its own enterprises to the corporates. The corporates are selling their critical strategic shares to foreign companies. So which direction is this economy going? That is a big question that must be asked. Dubey Sahab also asked me to respond on this whole question of lowering of increase in customs duties and this whole Atmanirbhar Bharat. I've been taking this position that this Atmanirbhar Bharat, this kind of self-reliance at this point in time is not really feasible, nor is it desirable. We have to be very strategic in terms of developing our industries. A general kind of clarion call that we are actually becoming inward looking is not something that is desirable for a country of India's size, a country which has so much of engagement with the global economy. And going forward, I hope the government actually reviews its stance that it has taken now. I'm sure that in the coming months we are going to see a wholesale revision of customs duties. That's what the finance minister has promised. But I hope we don't become inward looking to such an extent that it starts hurting the economy in the longer run. So these were some of the, sort of scattered thoughts that I had, the time that I could use here. And thank you for your attention.
So one point is that the size of the rescue package, the government claimed even in the first package that it was 20% of the GNP. And if you add the three packages together, then it could very well go up to 30% or 40% of the GNP. And as opposed to that, you have the figure of 2.5 to 3% mentioned by Biswajit. But I have read an article by Nagaraj from Trivandrum, where he said it is just 1%. And the real estate package is just 1% of the GNP. And whenever it involved a large-scale transfer of funds to the poor, the distressed, etc., there is a ceiling being put on that. And Manrega is one striking example of how it is being brought down. And the second thing is that on the whole question of, the restoring the rule of law in the field of trade, flow of capital, and sort of restoring back the world order, which was given a goodbye by Trump, and as I said that we rode on the crest of that. We cannot, I think there will be a strong bid to restore it in the form in which it existed, and we cannot oppose that. We have been a party to it in the past negotiations. It is very difficult to sell the point that we are in favor of the continuing chaos and violation of rule of law. So if the new US administration along with the Europeans take a view that they will restore it as it prevailed before Trump, we have to be seen as one of the leading powers trying to bring that about. But at the same time, we know that this world order have built-in elements of discrimination against us. And we have opposed it from the 60s. And I have been personally a part of that opposition. 20-30 years I have done it in my career. And the new laws that have been framed under the Uruguay round and proposed by the developed countries from time to time involving other flows, we have been opposed to that. So it is a very delicate task of joining the new US administration and European countries to restore the world order that existed 3-4 years ago. And at the same time, making the point of view that this must be reformed. I mean, we have some proposals on the table, like recently that, the vaccination for the coronavirus should not be subjected to IPR regime. And no company could claim IPR on that thing. It will be free for utilization by all the countries of the world. This proposal has not been accepted. US administration, past administration, and I don't think that the present administration is going to accept that. But we have one or two proposals we have made. We have been making it from time to time, right from the beginning. It's a very delicate task of restoring an inequitable, discriminatory world order, which existed before, and while doing so, continuing our past role of bringing about equality in it. And I don't know to what extent the government is aware of this delicate task, or they just want to take an opportunistic view that whenever there is an opportunity we will violate, and we will forget about long-term restructuring. We are not so much concerned about the shape of the world order to emerge 10 years, 20 years hence. It is not, it is not for India to think about. And we go on claiming that we are making contribution in this area, in that area, but we have no structured, orderly view of how things can be reordered. And so I've just put across this point of view. Sorry for taking time in between. Now I give the floor now to Professor Praveen Dhar.